I'm James from the Just for More Fix podcast, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. And get ready, because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
You are listening to the Starling Tribune, a podcast dedicated to the Arrow TV show.
I am the Green Arrow.
This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, situations, and stories are the properties of Time Warner. I am the Oracle, and this is your Tribune.
Welcome back to Earth 2's favorite newspaper, the Starling Tribune. I'm your chief editor this week. My name is SP, and your other award-winning, highly paid reporters for this episode number 199 of the Starling Tribune are Chris.
One lousy beer for breakfast.
Only one, Mick, only one. And Michelle.
I'm no one's side piece.
Yeah, would agree with that. Hey, everyone, this podcast is recorded on Sunday, June 3rd, 2018, live via www.geeks.live.
That's right, SP, and this evening we'll be discussing Legends of Tomorrow, as well as news, interviews, articles, and announcements that have dropped in the last week that could and very well will impact future episodes of Legends of Tomorrow, as well as the other shows in this universe, like The Flash, Supergirl, Arrow, Vixen, Constantine, and God knows what else they're going to dream up.
If you're new to the show, thank you for searching us out on the internet and joining us. After the show, you can check out our content at GonnaGeek.com, where you can also find other geeky videos, podcasts, and articles.
Thanks, guys. I think that about wraps it up for the introductions. And Michelle, I think it's time for us to go ahead and break down this episode that we're talking about this week for us.
Yes, this Legends of Tomorrow episode is called Return of the Mack. It's Season 3, Episode 5. It originally aired Tuesday, November 7th, 2017. It's directed by Alexandra LaRoche. Credits include 1 Arrow, 3 Flash, 1 Legends, 2 Eureka, and 1 The Dead Zone. It was written by Grain Godfrey. Credits include 11 Legends, 6 Flash, 1 Arrow, and 4 The Tomorrow People, and Morgan Faust, whose credits include 3 episodes of Legends.
As we talk about every week, we talk about the ratings. However, we're going to do something a little bit modified with the ratings. We're going to talk about the live plus 7-day ratings, or S plus 7 or D plus 7, whatever you want to call it. It's the plus 7 rating. So we're going to start on November 6th, 2017 with Supergirl's 5th episode of the 3rd season, titled Damage, to a total rating, this is 7-day rating now, remember, of 3.01. On Tuesday, the 7th of November, 2017, Flash Season 4, Episode 5 aired their episode Girls' Night Out, I actually remember this, to a total rating of 4.22, and that is the 7-day ratings. Right after that was Legends of Tomorrow, this episode, Return of the Mack, to a total rating of 2.54, and on Thursday, the 9th of November, 2017, Arrow aired the 5th episode of the 6th season, Deathstroke Returns. Ooh, this was a good one for you, Chris. And it had a total 7-day rating of 2.37. So definitely seeing Flash as number 1, Supergirl as number 2, followed by Legends and Arrow almost in a dead heat, but Legends did beat out Arrow. So those were the 7-day ratings back in November 2017, the week that this episode that we were talking about tonight aired.
Wow. I mean, I know that DVR ratings like really give a boost, but for Flash to get like a 2 million boost, but in Arrow to only get like a 1 million boost, that says a lot.
It says where the focus of people really were. Remember, this was right before the wedding, and the wedding was known to be happening for Flash. It was not known to be happening for Arrow. So I can see a lot of actual attention being given to the Flash couple versus the Arrow couple.
Yeah,
Great, Chris, what did you think
couple.
about those ratings?
So, it must have been nice to have Arrow being over 2s. I forgot about that, in all honesty, and thankfully it was a Deathstroke episode.
Now remember, it was the 7-day ratings. It wasn't the overnight ratings.
Okay,
So
that's a fair point. I'm still surprised.
it wasn't below 1.
I shouldn't dog on it. I'm sorry. That's not nice. But as we go back and recap all those episodes on there, I keep going, oh yeah, I remember some of these old episodes. And I remember that Deathstroke one, and part of me going, this could be the best episode of the season, but I really hope not, seeing as we're like 6 episodes in. But I think it might have been.
It might have been close. If we had to rank them, it would be in my top 5, that's for sure.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, we're going to get on and move and talk about this particular episode of Legends of Tomorrow and not reminisce about Arrow being above 2.0 on the ratings. And we're going to talk about the theme. And we start talking about the theme by talking about the title and how it actually applies to the episode. So, Michelle, what's with the overall theme?
Well, Return of the Mack is an actual song by Mark Morrison. It's from 1996, and the show notes have a link to the lyrics and the music video. A Mack is someone who is smooth and in charge, and yes, we have the return of Rip, but he's not a Mack. The Mack we're talking about is Damien Dark. He returns from the dead and takes charge of the scene right away.
He does. As soon as he gets out there, he's like, oh, man. Daddy's back, and who stole my watch?
I love that line, really. That was one of my favorite in this. There's this whole tense, serious moment. He's like, hey, who stole my watch?
Really likes that Palmer Tech, does he?
Evidently.
Yeah, I know. And that was something because, like, I've been rewatching some of the older Arrow episodes, and one with the Felicity Smoke episode where we learn about her mom and dad. It actually has the Palmer Tech in there. And then watching this episode, it was like, oh, yeah, that's right. He did that. Well, this is a time travel show. And SP, where do our legends end up?
Well, they start off in the time stream, but the actual episode starts with Rip in London, 1895, which I think is one of the farthest times back they go this season. I can't remember if they go to the paleo time period or not, but 1895 London, and you have the whole Sherlock Holmes thing, you have the Jekyll and Hyde things, you have vampire thing going on. It's Victorian England, you have fog, you have a bunch of unknowns out there, and Rip comes to investigate a time anomaly and just trying to find out what's going on with the vampires. But what he's really there to discuss is Mollis. And I like to say Malice, but he says Mollis, so I'll go with Mollis. And he gets a dead body, which all of the in the street, actually over some trash cans or barrels or something. And it's got a couple of pointing just circles in the neck. It looks like vampire fangs have gone in and maybe sucked out all the blood, but that wasn't the case at all, as we find out later. But that is what they're there to look at. And I think they did a reasonable job of portraying 1895 London. I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think they did an all right job. I mean, you can do a lot on sound stages and with creative camera cuts and things like that, and I think they pulled it off.
Yeah, 1895 is a good year, and especially London, for this to happen. The occult was really big during this time. People actually would hold seances weekly. There were people who made money being a medium and all that type of stuff. And of course, my favorite appearance was of Stein's great-great-grandfather, the actor. I loved seeing Victor Garber ham it up with a mustache, portraying his ancestor.
He's just a little eccentric, that's all.
Any Stein is eccentric, but the stash, oh man, the stash. I was wondering if he personally grew it and they just filmed some scenes back and forth, but no, they have to film these episodes in 8 days. There's no way they went back and forth on that. So it was costume, prosthetic, whatever you want to call it. But I don't know, he looked pretty good. And let's not forget that the actor actually sang the lullaby again. This was another episode where Stein, Victor Garber, actually got to sing and show off his vocal cords, his pipes, so to speak. And I think he did a pretty good job playing the villain, singing, and actually having a story, I would say, with Jax about breaking up Firestorm.
Well, this is Legends, and Legends is known for its action. Chris, what's some of the action we've seen during this episode?
Well, first, we know that Nate gets used as the bait. They use Pretty Boy to catch the vampire in this case. And when Nate's taken, we get a nice little chase scene as Rip and Sarah trying to chase down the wagon that they think he's in. They find potatoes. No, nothing great.
Is it potatoes or potatoes?
You say potato, I say potato. Do. I don't know, I got nothing. We get a cool hallway fight scene where you get Rip and Sarah getting to interact with each other, which is always fun for me. I like the interaction that these two characters have, and I think the actors play off of each other really well, where they get to pretend to be drunk going down a hallway and then just start kicking butt. That's always great to see, and they're pretty brutal together. I mean, you would imagine Sarah is. She's a trained member of the League of Assassins, and Rip is a seasoned time agent or whatever he's calling himself nowadays. Put on some pretty good fights.
I was thinking about Sarah during this episode, and we had talked about it a few weeks ago. Actually, you two talked about it a couple of weeks ago about the fact that the only two actors left in Arrow from the original season were David Ramsey and Stephen Amell. While the actor that currently plays Sarah was not in the pilot, her character was in the pilot. And so you can say that she is probably one of the characters left from the original pilot that are still in the #Arrowverse. Well, so we could say 3.
And we're down to 3 left on Legends of Tomorrow from the original crew too. So everything is starting to tighten up a little bit.
Sometimes change is good.
I think Legends is a perfect example of that. The fact how they change things up from season to season and the new flavor they put in there for the crew. Like, you go back and look at season 1, people didn't like the Hawks. The Hawks never came back. They make in-jokes about them, things like that. But the way this show works, I'm like, okay, we're going to throw them off the ship for a bit. If people like them, we'll bring them back. But they can do it. And that's what I like about this show is a constantly rotating cast of characters with a core group of 3 that are always there to hold everything together.
With one exception, which we will talk about later this season.
Yes. Fair point.
I love in the seance when, like, Amaya's like, our cover's blown, and it kind of turns into like a little bar fight.
Another Legends of Tomorrow tradition, in fact.
And Mick has always wanted to hunt vampires. You know, he's reading Dracula. Apparently, he always carries a wooden stake with him, and he has that platter where he's like, if anyone doesn't have a reflection, you get him.
I gotta laugh because he comes up with the stake, right? How long have you had that on there? And he's like, forever. From the beginning of time, he's had this stake. He's ready to go after vampires. He hates clowns, but he absolutely wants to kill vampires. So Mick's got a lot of personality this season.
Yeah, and vampires don't sparkle.
That's right. Don't blaspheme like that.
Sparkly baseball. That's the if you can get into that, you can get into sparkly vampires. Apparently Mick does not like baseball.
So Chris, what happens during this big ceremony that happens under the blood red moon?
This is when we get the resurrection of Damien Dark, and we find out that magic is far superior to technology in this case, as all the time agents are in there. And he's just mopping the floor with them. He's got one hand, he's got a drink, the other hand flailing about the magic, flinging people around. Those time agents didn't stand a chance against a magically empowered Damien Dark. And then it's the Legends to the rescue.
I thought it was interesting when Rip threw that time grenade that freezes time. And he's like, he thinks he's the man. He thinks he's going to get it. He gets that knife and he's going toward Damien Dark. But then Dark is like, nope, I'm magic.
It actually reminded me of a moment out of the Justice League movie where they're fighting Superman and the Flash starts speeding towards him and everything's moving in slow motion. And he's like, oh, I'm going to get him because I'm so fast he can't see anything. And then you just see Clark's eyes move and track him and he turns around and just punches him in super speed. It felt very much like that same moment to me here in Legends of Tomorrow.
See, I thought you were going to equate it to the Martha movement in Batman versus Superman.
Ugh. I like to pretend that never happened.
Unfortunately, it did happen. It's part of DCEU canon, and everybody's got to live with it. So
I like the take of Deadpool on it. Just make it a punchline and move on from there.
We actually have an interesting Zari moment. During the seance, Nora, who we learn who's the one that's being the medium, channels Zari's brother. I don't know if it's actually him, but she's manipulating Zari because she wants that totem. And Zari actually gives it to her because she's like, I want to talk to my brother again. But at during this fight, Zari actually takes it back, which I thought was cool.
She doesn't just take it back. I mean, it's actually drawn back to her. She like holds out her hand and almost it's like the Force, right? It comes right back to her and gets stripped from Nora's neck. It was an awesome thing saying the totem really wants to be with Nora, with Zari, not Nora. So that was interesting.
Well, why don't we talk about our captain, Sarah? SP, how do you think she did this episode?
Oh, I think she did reasonable. She was objectively assessing the fact that there might actually be an issue in 1895, which they go back to. Once they find Rip, she listens to him, at least has an open mind enough to listen to him, and then understands that this Mollis might be something that they need to be able to fight. And so she goes along with Rip, but I don't think she fully trusts him along the way. Now, they didn't have enough safeguards in place against Rip, and so Rip eventually double crosses him, not necessarily to be against the Legends, but because he knows that he needs to do things his own way and that the Legends can't be involved because of what they want to do with Damian. But I think she did okay. And matter of fact, she made the cold, hard call at the end of the episode to turn Rip in because he's betrayed every single organization that he's been with. And she also gives the Legends a free pass, even though that the Time Bureau thinks they're a bunch of putts. She gets a free pass to fly the skies free again, a little Firefly reference, I thought. So I think she did okay.
Chris?
She's pragmatic this time around. She makes the deal not once but twice to get the Time Bureau off of her in the Legends case. Originally, it's with Rip, that if they help Rip, that he'll call off the agents. Then when they see that the Rip thing is going to fall through and Rip's kind of gone off on his own, she makes the deal with the Time Bureau directly and says, hey, we'll give you Rip if you guys stay off our back, which is one of the big things they need to do at this point in the season. Because remember, the Time Bureau was very much anti-Legends, trying to keep them out of everything, and in fact, even to take back Gideon at one point in time. So she made the deal that needed to be done and still also went to go investigate the anomaly that they probably would have investigated anyways had neither of those bodies been involved. So she got something for something they were going to do anyways, which I think was a smart move. And I agree. I don't think she fully trusted Rip and expected to be betrayed, but I don't think they expected that he'd be able to control the Wave Rider like that to lock them down. But then she had a plan, and while it might be out there, it's a typical Legends plan. It's let's shoot ourselves and break the armor, and that way we can get out. I didn't see anyone else coming up with any ideas of how to get off the Wave Rider.
I think she was actually more upset at Rip, not so much that he betrayed them and locked them in the Wave Rider. I don't think she liked the way he reacted to all those time agents being slaughtered by Damien Dark. He actually says to her, well, they knew what they were getting into. They signed up for this time army thing. They know they could die. And Sarah, I mean, it really shows how much she's grown. She's really a captain. She knows what it means to take care of a team. And for her to hear that from Rip, I think that might be the moment when she decided to turn...
I'm James from the Just...
to turn Rip over to the Time Bureau.
I don't know. I think the deal might have been in place before that, as soon as they pretty much got done with that. As soon as they escaped the Wave Rider and came in and got involved and then saved Rip and tried to take out Damien Dark, I think shortly after that she was in touch with them and having a conversation, because at that point, and it could have been she came to that realization before she talked to talked to Rip also that he was uncaring about all the people that were lost under him, but she made a deal she needed to. I like that aspect of it. It's pragmatic.
Also, I think she realizes that with Rip there, not with the Time Bureau's knowledge, I don't think that he would have had the ability to make that deal anyway. So she went directly to the Time Bureau to make sure that the deal was made.
And she doesn't get screwed out of it.
Right.
How would you rate her as a captain, SP?
I'd rate her high. I'd rate because she's making the tough calls and she knows that there's this threat out there. So this was an interesting episode. I don't think I'd give her a 10. I'd definitely give her an 8. But because I think that they could have insulated themselves against Rip a little bit better. But yeah, an 8 sounds good to me. I mean, I don't think I'd want to go 9, but definitely an 8. A solid performance, in my opinion.
Chris?
I'm going 9. I mean, she made a deal. She got the Legends out of the trouble they were in. They got to try and save the day. It didn't necessarily work because of outside influences, but it wasn't anything that she did wrong that kept them from stopping Damien Dark. 9.
Yeah, I was thinking 8. I know it's the writers who haven't made Sarah, tell Gideon to get rid of all of Rip's old commands. But it's one of those things I think she should have done. But that's just me nitpicking. She was wonderful. Definitely an 8 to 9. She was very strong. One of the other storylines that we had in this episode is Firestorm. Stein is a grandpa, and Jax is seeing how he is, enjoying that family life. So, Chris, what do you think of Jax's plan on breaking up Firestorm?
So I understand his motivations on it. At the same time, I felt like they should have talked to Stein about it instead of going behind his back, because then that just introduces uncomfortableness, because you all know, no matter how hard you try to keep a secret, especially in big things, they're going to find out. And in this case, Stein finds out, and he's rightfully upset about it at first, and has a moment to, and when he has a chance to process, kind of understands what they're doing, and understands they're not coming from a point of maliciousness to keep him excluded from it. But at the same time, it still hurts him, and Jax is hurt by it too. The fact that Stein seems so upset by him. So I just feel like, especially the dynamic between Jax, Ray, and Gray, they should have just had a conversation about it, and it would have solved a lot of unnecessary stress and complications.
SP?
I can't disagree with Chris. I think it's right. I think they should have talked with each other, especially with their psychic connection. That is just, it's too much of a closeness. And again, the writers are playing loose and fast. Like sometimes they're almost one person, and at other times they can get away with having their own thoughts. So I think that talking with Stein would have been the preferable thing from the get-go. And I think he would have been on board with it. I think he was more hurt about not being told about it than anything else, because as we see at the end, he's fully on board. He's like, yeah, I think it's time for me to go home. Also, but he does say the whole Malice thing requires his attention. So there's that too.
I agree. They should have been honest. But then we wouldn't have Jax with his memory problem and looking at Rip like, hey, Rip, how did you get here? And Ray trying to cover it up. It's like, yeah, how do any of us get here? I love it when Ray tries to lie in that sort of like trying to cover up something, because he's just so terrible at it.
He's the Boy Scout.
Really bad at it.
So, Chris, what do you think of Rip coming back? What do you think about him?
Well, I always like it when Rip Hunter shows up. He's a character I've enjoyed. You can totally tell he's coming back. He's basically using the Legends. He pretty much says so. He's got no choice. He's out on his own. It's not a Time Bureau sanctioned mission. And I don't know about you guys, when he said that, the hair on the back of my neck stood up a little bit. I was like, something's not right here. Something strange is going to happen. But it's what they needed. This is what they did to set up the whole Malice thing, is Rip off on his own, You finally get the last seed, or you finally get a little bit of knowledge from what he was telling Ava earlier. They need the Legends to help them with something. Well, it's to stop Malice. So I was happy to see him back. I kind of figured he'd betray them. I was kind of sad to see it, and I kind of like the way he's slightly unhinged at the end. And I'm interested, or rather, when I was watching these new, I was curious to see where this went later on in the season. How you redeem the character or bring him back from seemingly kind of just losing his crap, being all about Malice, and not caring about the lives that were lost to stop it.
SP?
I again gotta agree with Chris.
This is scary.
Yeah.
It's very scary. I loved it when Nate said to Rip, so basically your new girlfriend dumped you, so you have to come back to your ex-girlfriend for some help.
Pretty much.
Like they called him on it, which was good.
Well, especially after he abandoned them at the beginning of the scene. Remember, it took 5 years. Rip took 5 years to create the Time Bureau. And when the Legends showed up, he's like, you're no longer needed here. You're the ones who screwed this up. We don't need you around. But then he let them, in his words, steal the Wave Rider. He's such a Jekyll and Hyde all the time. He will turn on you at the drop of a hat. And if I was Sarah, if I was the team, I would not ever trust Rip. Now, he's useful in particular use cases. He's very talented and has a lot of knowledge, but the way he goes about things and the way he'll turn on you, it's just not something that I want to subject my team to.
Yeah, it was interesting. Even Gideon tried to resist that command, but she couldn't. And she tells Sarah, first off, she really recognizes Sarah as captain. It's like, I really think that's it. I think everything that Rip ever did to me, I think it's gone. I think that says a lot. The team has grown beyond Rip. He's not their captain anymore. They've learned all they can, and they're doing their thing, making a mess and then cleaning it up.
Making a big mess sometimes.
And mostly cleaning it up. It depends on who's on kitchen duty.
Good point.
SP, is there anything else about the episode you'd like to talk about?
The whole Amaya Zari thing throughout the episode was interesting to watch because it was like people that are meant to be together, but in different times trying to work together. So it was just interesting. They could have been mother and daughter or sisters, and it was very strange. It's like they had never seen each other before, which of course they haven't before, the season. So I get how this is coming, but watching what is going on between the two and knowing that Amaya has some issues going on with her totem, which was talked about very briefly in this. I know it's been a while since we podcasted on this, but the whole totem thing, interacting with each other and acting up for Amaya, just remember that as we go through the rest of the season. It's something to watch.
Chris, anything else you'd like to talk about?
No, I'm just kind of happy to be back in the Legends side of things. I rewatched the episode this morning and I was like, oh yes, I remember what it's like to watch a show and have fun with it and be like, I can't wait to see what they do next, versus being like, oh no, what are they going to do next? So I enjoyed it.
I loved it when Mick is reading the book. He's like, I got 3 pages left.
Yeah, that was
now
fantastic.
I got 1 page.
That was
He's a
great.
speed reader. He got 2 pages done when missiles were flying. My hat's off to Mick. I didn't know he could read that much.
We have to remember that he is Cronus, right? He's much more than the heat wave thug that we were first introduced to.
Yes,
It's
he's
true.
evolved.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. I enjoyed this episode. I've watched this one 4 times. It's a really good one. It's funny. It's Mick being Mick. The team worked well together. Sarah got to do her thing. So Next episode, we're actually not going to cover a Legends episode. As we said in the intro, this is episode 199 of the Starling Tribune. And because we can count, that means the next episode is 200. And that's a very big milestone. So we are going to have a special to celebrate the fact that we have reached 200 episodes of the Starling Tribune. Isn't that great, guys?
Woohoo! 200.
Woot.
So with that, I think we're going to go to the news.
All right. Here we go. Live from the Starling Tribune main news desk on floor 52 of Starling Tribune Tower in the middle of Star City. It's the weekly news roundup with chief news anchor Michelle Ely. And now, Michelle Ely.
We actually have some Arrow news. First, in an Ask a Solo news, spoilers on Arrow, we learned that in season 7, Team Arrow will have to contend with an ambitious young anti-vigilante recruit at the SCPD. That means there's going to be people willing to be police officers in season 7 of Arrow. So that's good news for Star City. This person, basically, if vigilantes were vampires, consider her your Buffy. That says a lot. And then another recurring role to be cast is that of a successful tech whiz who is gay and who harbors a heartbreaking past. And I'm wondering, could we finally be getting Ted Cord?
Ooh, that would be interesting. But the way this is described as a successful tech whiz who is gay, that's Curtis, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, with a heartbreaking past, being that his husband dumped him for being a vigilante. I was like, this is Curtis too? What?
But maybe it's Ted Cord and Curtis and... Oh, wait. Curtis actually has a cop boyfriend, and we don't even know if this is Ted Cord, and I'm already shipping Curtis with some unknown person. That's bad.
So are we sure that his boyfriend survived? He was in the hospital. I don't know if we got a resolution as to whether he recovered or not. I assume he did.
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, that could be something that we talk about as the season gets closer, whether or not the boyfriend makes it through. And I think he does, because there wasn't a big concern around him. Of course, there wasn't really a concern about Quentin either. We know how that ended up. So I don't know.
It's just Cord Industries has been teased throughout different seasons of Arrow. Do we think it's finally time for Ted Cord to arrive?
I think it's time for Ted Cord to arrive. I think it's time for the Green Arrow to arrive. I think it's time to have a lot. I think it's time for Supergirl to actually come into the Arrowverse and not be a universe away, whatever it is.
Oh, that's merge isn't happening, though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Chris, Stephen Amell is talking about his face.
That's right. So if you guys remember last season, during the break, Stephen Amell kind of teased the fact that the Green Arrow at some point might eventually get the goatee. Well, Stephen Amell just confirmed that part of the iconic look from the DC comic universe will debut on Arrow Season 7. He told the crowd at Motor City Comic Con he will debut Oliver Queen's classic goatee in the upcoming Arrow season. He did caution that the goatee may not be sticking around forever, possibly signaling this is more of an Easter egg than a lasting redesign. I'm still okay with it myself. He made it clear, though, that Green Arrow's Robin Hood hat won't be making an appearance. In a quote, he said, "I can't promise I'm going to keep that goatee forever. I can definitely promise I'm not going to wear that stupid hat." I'm okay with that. Give him the beard. We've seen all sorts of weird Instagram mock-ups and Twitter photos of what Stephen Amell would look like with the goatee. I kind of want to see it because it's traditional to the Green Arrow look that you see in the comics. Not what you've seen when they had young Green Arrow temporarily and what you saw in Smallville, but Green Arrow's notoriously had that long goatee. I want to see it.
That's a good prison look.
The one thing that I remember from this series is never say never. So Stephen Amell can get up there, say what he wants to do or what he wants not to do, all he wants. Eventually, it actually happens. So not wearing a Robin Hood hat, I can actually see, like going to a costume party as Robin Hood, maybe something like that, not as the Arrow. So I can see. And remember, we are all predicting that, or at least I think we're all predicting that the prison doesn't last longer than like episode 3 because there's still the crossover to happen.
Sadly, we are predicting that if they do it right, it should last like the first third of the season at least.
Which would be in time for the crossover.
So is this like an official Starling Tribune prediction that we're thinking Oliver's out before the crossover?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, this is historic with the Arrowverse, right? Flashpoint really lasted one episode. Barry in prison only lasted like an episode. So yeah, it's an episode is about what our standard fare is with the show.
Well, talking about the crossover, Stephen and Mel actually discussed the next crossover. And in this crossover, we're going to get Batwoman. So Batwoman is coming to the Arrowverse, and fans are already champing at the bit for news. Amel wasn't ready to say very much about a major event story coming up several months from now. He said, quote, "I know the entire story of the crossover. It's awesome, and I can't talk about it at all." So comicbook.com was on hand during the CW's recent Upfronts presentation, where Stephen Amell announced that Batwoman would be introduced in the crossover. While it's unclear exactly how Batwoman will factor into the story, it was hinted that Gotham City will make an appearance, finally introducing it officially into the Arrowverse after being teased, name-dropped, and joked about.
It's about time. I mean, we got Bloodhaven. We've gotten all sorts of other cities from the DC universe. So let's actually get some Gotham.
But that would ultimately mean a crossover with the DCEU, which they have not wanted to do. And we have a lot of examples for that. The whole Deathstroke issue, that, you know, whenever the DCEU uses something, they take it out of this film. So if they decide that they want to use Batwoman in DCEU, that's one and done, really, with the Arrowverse.
Well, let's be honest, though. How much longer do we really think the show is going to go? Compare that with the time it would take them to spin up production on a Batwoman film. So I think we're probably okay here, because it'd be at least 2 or 3 years before they could get a Batwoman film out at this point.
Well, they did have the Batgirl film in development, which is no longer happening because Joss Whedon left. So I know that's two different characters, but they could adapt some stories.
Yeah,
based
I mean,
on
you
that.
could get a mention in the Gotham City Sirens movie they're talking about, or whatever they actually end up calling it. But I think they're probably fairly safe to have taken this character. My guess is they had to get permission again, like they did in the past for using Deathstroke and other characters. So they have permission for now. Let's just hope the rug doesn't get pulled out from under them. My guess is they're probably fine.
I have an interesting thought. Could this be a situation in the Arrowverse where, yes, there's Bruce Wayne, but Bruce Wayne isn't Batman? Instead, we actually only have a Batwoman?
That would be interesting. I would actually, I'm not the biggest Batman fan in the world. I mean, I do like different iterations of Batman, like Michael Keaton Batman I like. So could I do with him in the universe or not? I guess, but he's so integral in everything. It'd be hard to take him out.
I don't know. They pulled it off in Smallville, but they had to wait until the comics came around, and having Batman in there worked fairly well. And they were able to explain away the fact why he'd never been mentioned from 10 plus seasons of the series up until that point. So you could either get away with not having Bruce Wayne be Batman, or just have the revelation there's some shadowy figure in Gotham City that looks like a bat, and we're not sure who it is. And there could be a Batwoman, a Batman, a Batgirl, and various different members of the Bat family that are out there but never identified. So who knows?
I just hope it's done right, and I hope she is the Jewish lesbian hero that we have come to know and love in the comic books. I hope they do not change that. That would be very disappointing if they changed that.
Yeah, that's something that if they do... Now, do they have to point it out? No, but they would need the character to have that backstory.
Yeah, but let's be honest, though. If you can say one thing about Arrow, it's that it's never been subtle about much of anything. So if it's happening, they're going to beat you in the face with it. Because how many times have we been told that Curtis is gay, or heard mentions of Curtis's boyfriend, and blah, blah, blah. They're not subtle about anything relationship-wise or sexuality-wise, it seems like, on this show.
Come on, Haas. It isn't that bad.
Yeah, okay. You just put a Haas in here. We were Haas-free until now.
You're welcome.
Man, just one episode. Can we just not drop the Haas?
I'm putting Haas into everything now for the rest of this episode. I'm going to burn it out and make it so nobody wants to hear it. Okay, Haas?
Okay, Haas.
Well, all right, Haas, Chris, you have Legends of Tomorrow news.
That's right, Sue. If you are watching Legends tomorrow as we describe these things, fast forward about 2 minutes because we're going to talk about what happened at the end of the season and how that sets up into this upcoming season of Legends. So fast forward about 2 minutes. So, guys, we have some news about what's going to happen in this upcoming season, a detailed synopsis courtesy of the fine folks over at comicbook.com. After defeating the demon Mollusk by cuddling him to death with the giant stuffed animal, the Legends are ready to ease off the gas. Sarah and her team join Ava Sharp and the Time Bureau to help clean up the last few remaining anachronisms. The job seems straightforward enough until one John Constantine arrives to inform them that in solving one major problem, they have created another, much larger one. When the Legends let time crumble in order to release and defeat Mollusk, the barrier between worlds softened. History is now infected with fugitives, magical creatures from myths, fairy tales, and legends. Having been expelled throughout time by people like Constantine, these fugitives are now returning to our world in droves and making a real mess of things. As the Time Bureau is distrustful of and ill-equipped to deal with magic, the Legends must team up with everyone's favorite demonologist to set history back on track. So we're going from being like sci-fi time travel as much to now more like fantasy demons and time travel. And I'm totally on board with this idea. It sounds like tons of fun, and that's how we get Matt Ryan as John Constantine this season. More demon hunting. Make it happen.
So wait a minute. After ABC ran Once Upon a Time into the ground, literally, they're going to take that concept and throw it in Legends of Tomorrow.
That's not the concept of Once Upon a Time. No, Once Upon a Time was the fairy tale people stuck in a town in Maine and had nothing to do with demons invading Earth and exorcisms and demonology or anything like that. That is not Once Upon a Time. And I watched Once Upon a Time.
This is playing more with the fact that a lot of the stories and myths that we have in history could be attributed to things like demons and fantasy, things like that, and then kind of get twisted into tall tales and things like that. So I think that's more of what we're going to see.
You mean like Haven?
I never watched that show, so I can't speak to that.
God, Haven got weird with like the cat. What was it called? The cabin or the lodge
The
or
barn.
something? The what? The barn. Yeah, the lodge is Twin Peaks. The lodge is Twin Peaks. Yeah, the barn in the sun. And oh, man. You needed notes for that show.
You did, and it got really weird, and it didn't have to go the way they did, but okay.
I think this is amazing. Again, Legends of Tomorrow finding a fresh way to do what they're doing. You know, first season was dealing with the Hawks and helping them, and the next, this season being about like Mollusk and everything. And it's just amazing about how they're just reinventing themselves and how they're just not afraid to do so. It's just one of the reasons why I love this show so much.
As long as we can keep Bebo, I think we're fine.
I want a Bebo. I want a Bebo. And I want Bebo socks.
They need to make a stuffed Bebo. Even if it's just like a Comic-Con exclusive or whatever, they're only available there. There'd be a lot of people that would want them.
Yes. And well, that wraps up the news. The Starling Tribune, we are part of a larger network, the GonnaGeek.com network. And we have a lot of other different podcasts, don't we, Chris?
That's right, Michelle. There's 25 plus shows on the network. They cover a variety of things. You've got things like the Starling Tribune that you're watching now. We're pretty narrowly focused. We talk about the CW Arrow TV show and the shows surrounding it. We've got other shows that talk about general geek culture, tabletop gaming, video games, geek news. There is a little bit of everything on the Gonna Geek network. So we can't very well tell you about every show on the network, but this week I'm going to tell you about 2 shows because they crossed over. On the Bubble podcast crossed over with In Defense Of in an episode entitled Prayers for the Dying, Saving Canceled Shows. On this episode, Josh, the host of On the Bubble podcast, was lucky enough to be asked to be on fellow Gonna Geek Culture podcast In Defense Of to discuss fan campaigns and fan actions around struggling TV shows. So guys, 2 shows for the price of one. Go check out either In Defense Of or On the Bubble podcast. The most recent episode is a crossover between these 2 shows. It's pretty fun. It's pretty great. And there's some pretty good opinions going around. So go check that out. GonnaGeek.com. Click on the network button, and you can find those shows and all of the other ones on the network. All that being said, though, I think it is time for us to start wrapping things up. A big thank you to everyone who did watch live and participated in the Geeks.live chat room, but also a thank you to anyone who has caught the replay on YouTube at youtube.com/GonnaGeek or pulled the audio episode down from our RSS feed on things like from StarlingTribune.com or caught things on Spreaker, etc. We thank you all for listening.
And remember, you can always catch us live as we record at www.geeks.live. We record at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific on Sundays. You can join our live chat via geeks.live.
We would love to hear from you. We are the Starling Tribune on Facebook and Instagram, at Starling Tribune on Twitter, and you can call us at 612-888-CAVE. That's 612-888-2283. And you can also tell your Amazon device to enable the Starling Tribune skill. Well, this brings us to the end of another great episode. Any last words before we sign off? At Stargate Pioneer.
Hashtag ruined cargo bay.
At the Chris Farrell.
Hashtag Hoss free next week.
And I am at Michelle Ely signing off with hashtag you lied to me. Oracle, I think we're done here.
This was the Starling Tribune. You can leave us feedback at GonnaGeek.com or check out our archive at StarlingTribune.com. Visit GonnaGeek.com for more podcasts. Music by Kevin MacLeod can be found at Incompetech.com. This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, stories, and situations are the property of Time Warner. No infringement is intended. We will see you for the next episode of CW's Arrow.